Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this basketball season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of stats, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and injury insurance on your picks are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million players who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/get100 and use code GET100. That's code GET100 at prizepicks.com/get100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.
You are listening to the Hiking Radio Network, where we talk the walk with shows by hikers, about hikers, for everybody.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning.
Welcome to the Jester Section Hiker Podcast with the spotlight on section hikers.
And I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river.
Welcome to the podcast, everybody. You are listening to Jester Section Hiker, the premier podcast with the spotlight on section hikers, and I'm your host, Julie Jester Gayheart. For today's episode, I am putting the spotlight on Cathy Tarr, who is the executive director for the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation. You will hear that Cathy is a pretty special person who has dedicated herself to helping and assisting families of missing hikers. As you get to know Cathy, you will find out she spent some time on the Appalachian Trail in the White Mountains of New Hampshire. She loves being a trail angel to hikers, and the PCT has a special place in her heart. After you hear today's interview, I think you will all agree with me that Cathy is simply awe-inspiring. For those of you that have been listening to the podcast for a while now, you have heard me mention the name Kris Sherpa Fowler. Kris is the son of a very close friend of my little sister, Sally Guyton Fowler. Kris, or Sherpa, went missing on the PCT in October of 2016 and has yet to be found. There is not a week that goes by that I don't think about Sherpa and hope he is found and brought home to be with his family. As I bring you the connection between Cathy, Sherpa, and now the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation, I think you will agree the hiking community truly is a special place with a lot of trail angels and people doing amazing work. And sometimes that work has to be focused on things we don't like to talk about or think about. And one of those things is missing hikers. Thank you for joining me for this week's episode, and now on to meeting Cathy Tarr, Executive Director for the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation. All right, you guys, welcome back to the podcast, and please welcome with me Cathy Tarr, Executive Director of the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation. Thank you for joining me on the show today, Cathy.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
I really appreciate you coming on. And today what I want to do is I really want to spread what you guys are doing and get out there what you guys are doing at the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation. And I think the best way to do that is, first of all, kind of build your story and tell people who you are, and then get into how it kind of led up to you as well. So, Cathy, I know you love the Appalachian Trail community. I know you love being a trail angel. So let's kind of start with that. So kind of tell the listeners, your story of, I know you love the White Mountains of New Hampshire. So talk to us about that a little bit.
Yes, I love the White Mountains in New Hampshire and Maine. It's beautiful up there. That's actually where I learned how to hike, navigate, use the map, you name it, self-arrest. These are things that I learned to do up there. And I rented a house in Airbnb, and just by luck, the people who I rented from has worked in the huts, and one works for the ranger station. So they were amazing in helping me learn how to read maps and such. So the AMC has a book, which is the Bible of the mountains up there, which comes with 6 maps. And I was staying in a town called Shelburne, which is on map 6. And I'm someone that likes to organize things all the time. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to hike every mountain on map 6. It has a trail to it, and the mountain has a name. So I think when I added a few, like Mount Washington, before I left, it ended up being about 42 peaks I bagged that summer.
Oh, wow.
And I learned a lot.
And I'll go ahead and tell you, and everybody knows this on the East Coast, peak bagging in the White Mountains is a thing. I mean, it is truly a thing. It's a coveted thing. And, you know, there's I think it's the 46ers or something like that. And if you've done 42 of those peaks, I mean, Cathy, you are something else with hiking. And you did that. Did you do that during the winter?
No, that was the summer.
Okay.
The first summer when I did the map 6, it was during the summer. I had gone back in the wintertime to learn how to self-arrest and things like that. But yeah, when you learn how to hike in the Whites and then you get on a regular trail, it's like, whoa. You know, I would come to a junction and the sign said to go that way, but it was nothing but chunks of rocks. And I'm like, you got to be kidding me. So I'm like, well, let's do this. Sure enough, that was the trail. Yeah. So if it's not, it's quite, you know, when you get above the trees or the rocky trails. So then when I came out to the PCT, I'm like, whoa, this is nice.
This is totally
it's actually
different.
walking on. Yeah. So it really was a good place to learn how to really
so let's talk about that transition a little bit. So you cut your teeth on the White Mountains. You spent some time on the Appalachian Trail. I know you've done some trail angeling. And then you got out west and decided, I think, that you wanted to train and do a through hike on the PCT. So walk us through that a little bit.
So I went back to New Hampshire actually to learn how to self-arrest in that for the PCT. I wanted to learn as much as possible. And so I went back there, and I had a permit for the PCT to start in March of 2017. And I had trained with a full pack up there, and the self-arresting and hiking in snow and making sure that my gloves were going to keep my fingers warm. I mean, I was doing everything that I thought was right. And so 2 weeks before I was going to leave New Hampshire to go to Southern California for this hike, I was a passenger in a car in Portland, Maine, when we were in a car accident. And unfortunately, it broke my sternum, which meant there's no way I could put a pack on my back. So devastated was a word that comes to my mind after all of that training and all that planning. And it was just done. I was devastated. And I was laid up in a bed for a number of weeks. But once I healed, I'm like, okay, you know, maybe I can do some section hiking, which later on, and I can't remember what month, I actually went to Harper's Ferry. Yeah. But I only hiked up to Waynesboro, Pennsylvania. Because it rained every day. And I just was not enjoying myself. I'm like, you know, I have a couple of pictures where the sun is shining, but trust me, it rained every day. So it just wasn't enjoyable. But it was a great experience. You know, it's not that far. I don't even know how many miles it is, but it took me 11 days. So, but
hey, but you were out there. That's the thing. So, and this was after, you know, you were in the car accident, you know, you fractured your sternum. I cannot even imagine. What do they do for that? Just tell you to lay down? Are you in some kind of cast or what was that?
Yeah, it's just a lot of rest.
Gotcha.
Yeah, a lot of rest. It was just, you couldn't even move you couldn't move your muscles without pain. It was not pleasant.
Wow.
But, you know, so once I let's see, I did the AT section hike that a little bit. Just love being on trails. And
Is that where the trail
I travel.
angeling came in, or were you trail angeling before?
So I was trail angeling when I was up in Shelburne, New Hampshire. The AT actually comes out to Route 2, which most every hiker that comes out to there will go into Gorham because there is a Walmart in there.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was actually staying on part of the Appalachian Trail, which is called North Road. And so when I would come out, I was always looking for hikers to take them into town or to bring them back. And then I heard their stories. And so that was nice. The first time I went to Mount Washington, the person I was renting from drove me up. You can actually drive to the top of Mount Washington. And I'm like, oh, this is not me, but okay, let's do this. So we went up there and there were 3 PCT hikers up there that kind of like, can we get a ride? And I'm like, come on, let's go, because you're not allowed to ask for rides when you're up there.
Right.
And so we brought them down and they ended up camping in the yard and stuff and got to know them. And I asked 100 questions, of course, and really enjoy the trails and the hikers.
And it sounds like you got really engrossed in the community. So you've knocked off map number 6. You've done some trail angeling. You were going to go, hike in 2017. You had your permit. You were going to the PCT. You had the tragic car accident. You recovered from that. You spent some more time on the AT. And now let's get out to where you kind of ended up out west. And let's kind of turn the conversation now to how you ended up. Was it a search party for Kris Sherpa Fowler, or how did you end up searching for Kris? And maybe give us a little background from your perspective, who Kris is.
Okay, well, once I left the East Coast, I went up to North Dakota and some of those areas, South Dakota and all that. I love to travel and I had no destination. And I ended up in near Phoenix, Arizona, visiting my son who lived there at that time. And since I was going to hike the PCT, I was on all the pages. So this is now 2017. And I saw there was going to be a 4-day search for a missing Pacific Crest Trail hiker named Kris Fowler. So Kris Fowler is from Ohio. And he had hiked all the way through California and Oregon and was within 300 miles of the northern terminus, but had disappeared. And so when I saw the 4-day search, I'm like, well, I have nothing to do. So I drove from Phoenix and drove up to the state of Washington and participated in the search, which at that time, we had different information than we have now. And that happens. But yeah, so Kris was somebody who made a lot of friends on the trail. A lot of hikers liked him. He was very personable. But unfortunately, when he left White Pass, he was by himself and a storm was coming in. So at this time, I think possibly between White Pass and Chinook Pass is where he's at. But unfortunately, I have to say that the through hiker is one of the hardest hikers to find. Because anytime you come to a road, they could have pitched ahead. And so if you really look at it, you're looking at 300 miles of trail that Kris could be on. Of course, there's higher probability areas than others, but it's so vast out there. We still hope that we can find them, but it's not easy.
So, and just so you know, Cathy, I have mentioned Kris a couple times on the podcast, and I have I had a former guest on, and she talked about Kris on the podcast, and and the listeners know that my little sister is friends with Kris's mother, Sally Guyton Fowler. And I know that you were in correspondence with Kris's mother as well, during this time. So you spent time, searching for Kris, and you just told us the story of, the through hiker is the hardest hiker to find. So what was that search like when you first did that? What is it like when somebody goes out and searches for somebody?
Well, I was definitely not the lead searcher on this. When I got up there was already people who had maps out and had the idea where we were going to search. So I was perfectly fine being the follower. Tell me where you want me to search, and that's where I'll search for you. So the 4 days we camped out, and I can't remember the pass we were at, but we camped out for 4 days and searched some areas, and then everybody went home. And I was still there, and I'm like, I can search myself. So I had my maps and kind of systematically was looking at different sides of the trail, looking for clues more so than Kris, because sometimes if someone falls, a hat will come off or something in that way. So I was looking for clues, and I actually did not reach out to Sally at that time. I felt that she had enough on her plate, but people started talking to her about me, and she reached out to me to thank me for what I was doing. And we have been friends since. We talk a lot and message almost every day sometimes. And she's actually an honorary board member at this point on our foundation. But it's sad, when families are in this position, it's called ambiguous loss. You're stuck in this time period, and you can't move forward because you don't know what happened to my loved one. Where are they? And it's a real thing that is it's the word I'm looking for. It's tragic.
No, I'm just trying to think.
Devastating.
It is a word. I mean, it's just I cannot even imagine. I just cannot imagine. I mean,
yeah.
So even going on a search, I mean, I just feel like I would fall to pieces even searching for somebody. I mean, it takes a certain for me, it would take a certain mental power. And I see you as like, you have got the mental power. I mean, just unbelievable mental power. So, okay, so here's Kris's story, and Kris is still missing, just so the listeners know. And are there any clues there's no gear, there's just nothing with Kris that we know of, right?
There's really nothing other than we know for a fact because someone had drove him to the White Pass trailhead and took a picture of him, which was golden information. Without that picture, we'd still be wondering, well, was it really Kris they had in that car? So pictures are great. So we saw the picture. There's Kris. He's getting on White Pass Trail. We know there's a storm ahead, and weather is definitely something that will create a situation where a hiker's out there by himself and in trouble.
Yeah.
And
something to definitely 100% as hikers to 100% think about the weather. Always check the weather. Okay. So we know the first part of the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation name, Kris Sherpa Fowler. Let's get into the second part of the name, David O'Sullivan, who is another missing hiker. So talk to us about when David O'Sullivan went missing. And you've even become an advocate for his family. So tell us a little bit about David O'Sullivan.
Yeah, so David O'Sullivan was another Pacific Crest Trail hiker. And while I was searching for Kris in Washington, I was at the Cracker Barrel in White Pass. And I walked in and I'm like, whoa, there's another missing hiker in Southern California in the town of Idlewild. And I knew this town because I'd been there before, and my daughter lives maybe 30 minutes from there in a town called Winchester. And I was going to come down and visit her anyhow. So I come down and visit with my daughter, and I said, I'm going to go up to Idlewild and see if I can help search for David. And to my surprise and shock, when I went up there, no one was searching for him. There was no missing flyers. Even though I had seen a flyer in the state of Washington for David, there was nothing in Idlewild.
So Idlewild, so for those of us on the East Coast, just real quick. So Idlewild, California is how far from where you were in the Cracker Barrel? How many miles? Like where you were in the Cracker Barrel and saw that flyer compared to where he went missing. I mean,
well over 1,000 miles.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking.
I mean,
over 1,000 miles. You see this flyer at a Cracker Barrel in White Pass, Washington, And okay, continue on. So I just wanted to give somebody some scale who's listening, like, wow, okay, here's a flyer 1,000 miles north, and this gentleman has gone missing 1,000 miles south. So I just want to give some mileage to that.
Yeah, absolutely. I was very surprised by it. So Idaho is a mountain town that the Pacific Crest Trail goes through, and most hikers will go there to resupply, rest. It has a post office, a laundromat, grocery store. Great place to resupply there before moving on towards Big Bear. And so just as it happened, I didn't know this, but his parents had just flown in from Ireland and had gone to the Irish embassy in San Francisco. And then they went to the Irish Outreach in San Diego, who had brought them towards Idaho. So I met them in Idaho for the first time and showed them around the town, showed them places that I knew David had been because we had done some investigation on that. And so when we went into the post office and looked at the logbook, his mother found his signature in there,
Wow.
which was amazing because it was the only place from the southern terminus forward that we found his signature in a logbook, and she found it. So that was amazing. And of course, it was very emotional. And I took them up to the PCT so they can be on the trail. And although they didn't want to, and this happened with Sally as well, leaving without your loved one is very, very emotional. And but they went back to Ireland, and they've been back a couple of times since then. But unfortunately, in this particular instance, they weren't getting a lot of help in any way from authorities or the Travel Association itself. And I felt so bad. And I'm like, listen, I'll work with you for a couple months. And now it's how many years later? I'm still doing it.
3 years later. Yeah. I mean, almost 4 years later, because we're 2021 now. And so, okay. So yeah. So we have the foundation. So we know who you are, Cathy. At this point, I know you're an angel. That is 100% for sure. I mean, to be able to stand with a family on a trail when their son is missing, I cannot imagine. And then you bringing up even this happening with Sally, with Kris, not wanting to leave and leaving without your loved one. I cannot imagine. And I think hikers need to hear this. I think they really do. And in the case of David O'Sullivan, I mean, this is international. This is somebody that came to hike their dream trail, probably planned for, years and having that in their mind and, hey, I'm going to go do this. So now we have the name of the foundation. So it's named after Kris and David. So the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation. And then you just mentioned about, how things go when somebody goes missing, who might look for you, who may not look for you, who's going to help and all that kind of stuff. And you mentioned something to me, and I have it quoted here in our original conversation. You said, and this is very, very powerful, and I have thought about this every day since you said this to me. And I just don't know what I want to do with this statement. So I need you to help me, Cathy. You said, where you go missing has a lot to do with how you are going to be found. So let me repeat that again for everybody so everybody can hear it again. Where you go missing has a lot to do with how you are going to be found. I've never thought about going missing. And I know these guys, Kris, Sherpa, and David, they didn't think about going missing. So what does that mean? When you said that to me, what does that mean?
Well, I think, we've learned a lot on a David O'Sullivan case as to how to search, what to look for, how to systematically do it. But I'd say between the two cases, when you're hiking a long trail, you're going through states and counties and different jurisdictions. And when Kris Fowler went missing, till just up to a little while ago when the sheriff retired, he was in constant contact with the family. They searched for him periodically from 2016 till today. They're still talking about a search. And that is hopefully that's the norm, but that's not what we're seeing. So we had a situation where the O'Sullivans reached out to the sheriff in this county. He did not reply to her.
Wow.
He reached out to the Trail Association, which was not very supportive. They've gone to the sheriff's office, and it just wasn't good. So jurisdictions are all different. Some people might say, well, search and rescue didn't search long enough for my daughter or my son. But search and rescue is a unit of volunteers who is guided by the sheriff. So the sheriff will say, okay, enough. This person cannot be alive at this point, so we're pulling you off. Even though there might be members on that SAR unit that would rather continue that search, they have to stop if they're in that unit and want to continue to be in that unit. And when I was in Washington and Southern California, there were times when people would say to me, you should join a SAR team. And that's when I knew that was the last thing I wanted to do, because now I'm held down by regulations and rules and laws. And at that point, I could search at any time I wanted to. And so that was the difference that I started seeing us moving towards, is not to get bogged down by regulations of when I can or cannot search, but being there for the family and searching for their loved ones in a systematic way to at least give a chance to find someone.
And that is a great way to explain that, because as I'm sitting here, I'm like, okay, the sheriff guides, SAR. And when the sheriff decides, okay, we're going to pull this, it's time, this is not a rescue. This is, it's a recovery, I guess, is what we hear on TV. It's no longer a rescue. It's a recovery. And then, you have the family, and it just seems like all these parts.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's just it. So if you're in a jurisdiction, there are times when a person could go missing and the search is 2 days and they stop the search. Well, in my mind, that person could still be alive. So a lot of it has to do with who that sheriff is within that county, within the jurisdiction, so how long they'll let someone be out there. If you're in a very cold area and you search for 5 days, that person may not still be alive. So it depends on the weather and such, but the sheriff is very powerful in how long somebody searches for you. And then also different SAR units, some are very good and some not so much. Maybe they need more training or something. Maybe they're a newer team. I know that SAR goes out and trains a lot, and they have a lot of knowledge. But again, the sheriff says, you're done. There's nothing they can do but walk back and tell the family. And that's where
that's where the foundation comes in now. Mm-hmm. And that is a perfect lead into. So now, you have the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation. And I really want to get into what you guys are doing as a foundation. And I want to read your mission statement, because the mission statement alone to me is very powerful. So the mission statement of the foundation reads as follows: with safety and compassion as our core principles, the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation provides assistance to families of missing hikers, connects them to vetted resources, facilitates searches on their behalf once official efforts have been suspended, and supports initiatives to prevent future missing hiker cases. So it seems like you've already told us kind of what prompted you and led you to start a foundation. So do you want to expand on that for us a little bit?
How we started a foundation, or why?
Like, as far as, okay, so now, you've started this foundation. What was it? Because you didn't have any control over searching for families, or was it because you wanted to 100% be in control of everything that you wanted to do as a foundation?
So the seed was planted to think about being a nonprofit. We were already doing what a nonprofit would be doing anyhow. And we met a woman in Mammoth, California, which is in Central California. And Her name is Ingrid Tanner. And she spoke to us about nonprofits and her foundation. And she told us, I will totally support you if you become a nonprofit. And her foundation has set us up our first year this year with all the equipment that we will need, a trailer, transportation, everything. So she's been an angel to us. But I thought about it, and being a nonprofit brings in more resources to us. Up to this point, a lot of the people that's on the board were people that I've worked with on these cases, and we've all put out quite a bit of money of our own, because that is one of our core things, is we will never ask a family for money. So the O'Sullivans and Sally, they had GoFundMe accounts. And so what we were doing is like, okay, you have a GoFundMe account, we need this resource, and then they would support that resource. Now, as a nonprofit, we have our own resource. We don't have to ask the family even to do a GoFundMe. So, but we never, ever want to, and we do caution them of people who may come in and says, I will search for your loved one for this much an hour or this much a day. What other resource do they have that we don't? So I always caution the family to be careful on who you bring in. But of course, when you have someone
like a private investigator type person, or who would a family, and just, this is my naiveness, I guess, and a lot of people, who in the world thinks about this stuff? So who are families bringing in beyond the local authorities? Like, if they decide to do that, and now we want them to, to contact you, if something happens, so you can help. But
Right.
what does a family do? Who are they calling?
Well, it's not the family calling. It's the people who are reaching out to the family. So they'll hear that someone's missing, and they'll reach out to the family, and they'll say, for X amount of dollars, we will search for your missing loved one. Some of them come in with very crazy ideas about how they can search for someone, which is not scientifically proven. And even though you can give advice to a family, it's their son or daughter that's missing. And so I tell them, I can give you advice. What you do is totally on you, and I totally understand if you want to give this a try. Because I'm not in their shoes, and I could, if I was, I'd probably be hiring them too. So, but we do give advice on some resources that are out there that are not, they're kind of savory. Is that the word I'm looking for? Savvy?
Yeah.
They're not there for the family.
Yeah. I was getting ready to say they're there for the money or whatever the family's willing to pay to find their loved one.
Yes. And some families,
I had no idea people even did that. I'm like, really?
It's very sad. It really is. And so they'll take the money, but we've not yet seen any of these resources find anyone. So do they believe they can find the person? I don't know.
We're not sure.
Why would you ask the family who just, is going through this devastated moment in their life, and then you say, I'll search, but you have to pay me. But that's why they do it, because when the family's in that state,
the family's vulnerable.
Very much so. Yeah. Yes, very vulnerable. Yeah.
So let's talk about some awesome things that the foundation is doing. And, what the overall goal is. You are assisting families, but you're also doing some really cool things for hikers as far as like education and things you're offering. And you've got some programs within your foundation right now. You've got the microspike thing going on. You've got the Garmin InReach. So talk to us about what you're doing with the microspikes, and then we'll get into, I think the giveaway for the Garmin InReach is coming up, or it will have happened by the time this episode comes out. So talk to us real quick about those two things.
Yes. So one of the things we do in our foundation is try to prevent some hikers from going missing, or if they get lost or get hurt, maybe they would have an InReach, which is a satellite communicator, and they just push that SOS button and they are found immediately, which then they wouldn't need us. So we have this year, we have 4 InReach units that we are giving away. Tomorrow will be the announcement of the winners. And with 4 of them, every year, one will be donated in the name of Kris Fowler and David O'Sullivan. Then we have 2 others this year. One is Trevor Lur, and he was a Pacific Crest Trail hiker who died last year. He slipped off of the side of Apache Peak and actually fell to his death. He was from Texas. One's his name, and the other one is in Kris Sylvia's name, who was a Pacific Crest Trail section hiker down by Warner Springs. And each year, we hope to have 2 or more units to give away. So that's amazing. We're excited about that. We also have a microspike program we're working on, and will be initiated by the time this comes out. And we're working with Nomad Ventures in Idaho and Doug Lur, the father of Trevor, and our foundation are coming together to educate the Pacific Crest Trail hikers that you need to think about snow before the Sierra Mountain. You need to think about it with the Santa Mountain, which is over 10,000 feet, and the trail itself goes up to 9,000. And when there's snow up there, it's dangerous. You have Apache Peak, and then you have Fuller Ridge, and these are dangerous areas when there's snow. So you need something. And so at this time, we have decided to give a up to 20% discount for Pacific Crest Trail hikers, and they can pre-order them, and then we will have them at the Paradise Valley Cafe for them when they get in. And this is a cafe that most hikers go to because it's only a mile off the trail and it's hot food. And so they'll come there and their spikes will be waiting for them. So now they can take these spikes, go through the mountain, maybe go up through Big Bear, and then bounce them up to the Sierra. So it's in one way educating them. You need to have spikes. The Santa Mountain is the very first mountain that is going to give you trouble when you're heading northbound. And to my surprise, many of the junctions have a lot of signs up there because there's a lot of trails that go off the PCT up there. But the trail itself, this long scenic trail, had no signs saying which direction to go. And so many of them use, like on the Appalachian Trail, the gut hooks to guide them. In the situation of David O'Sullivan, he didn't have any electronics to guide him. So you come to a junction and it's giving you all these names of trails, but not one says PCT. So we've noticed within the last 2 weeks that now there's these beautiful signs at the junctions. So now the PCT hikers can be navigated through this dangerous mountain at the very least. So there's some navigational things going on, the InReach and the microspikes. So we're hoping that this year we can get everyone through the mountain safely, either with information for them to be like, you know what, I'm not really that good in snow, so let me take this alternate. And there's signs up there now that tells you what alternate to take, which used to be there, but it burned a few years and was never replaced. And our foundation actually reached out to the U.S. Forest Service and such, and they love the idea of replacing them, but then they talked about funding, that they didn't have the funding to do it. But they're all up now. And it's just such a dangerous mountain. We had John Donovan, who was a Pacific Crest Trail hiker who got lost in a whiteout up there. Now we have David O'Sullivan, and Trevor has died up there. And every PCT season in this mountain, there are rescues every year. So we're trying to do our best to educate them about this, because they tend to say, hey, what kind of winter gear are you going to get for the Sierra? And it's like, yeah, you better think about the Santa Mountain first before you go that far north. So that's what we do in our mission so far.
And I'm telling you right now, you also have, I've noticed on social media, specifically on Facebook and Instagram, like a safety Saturday, or where you will put out a safety tip, on your foundation page. And I've been sharing that because I think that is awesome. You can never give a hiker too much knowledge. sometimes, people are like, oh, I see that stuff all the time. I don't think you could ever give a hiker too much safety knowledge. That's just my personal opinion. So that's another thing that I've noticed you guys have been doing as a foundation as well, which I think is great.
That's our Safety Hiker Saturday. And those come out. One of the reasons, there's several, but one of the reasons hikers go missing sometimes is overconfidence. And so we try to let them know, here's some things you may not know. So we get those out every Saturday. And we may be doing something on each Tuesday moving forward. We're a newer foundation, so we're working to make ourselves more and be accessible more and get more information out. But so far this year, we publicly announced ourselves this year, even though we were a nonprofit last year with COVID and some other things going on, we decided to wait till this year. So within 2 months, we have found the missing persons remains. We have got the InReach program going, the microspike program going, and there seems to be some really nice signs up on this mountain.
Cathy, that is phenomenal. I mean, I'm not kidding. I wish you guys could see Cathy because I'm not kidding. I mean, this is a very emotional show, I think, because we're talking about some very emotional and personal things for people. But then we could also smile because the foundation, they're finding people, they're helping families, they're helping existing hikers, and the education piece and the safety piece are phenomenal. And that's another reason I wanted to have you on, because the more information we get out there, and I don't care what trail people are hiking, AT, PCT, CDT, it doesn't matter, Arizona Trail, hiking in Alaska. I mean, safety's first. I mean, you got to be safe and you got to know, your ability. And you said it earlier, a lot of hikers can get overconfident. And, the more information that comes out, the better, I think. So I love it. And I also wanted to bring up some things that you guys maybe are looking for in your volunteers. And I'm just going to list a few things because you taught me some stuff. And I think some of the things that your volunteers are doing are amazing. I mean, you have people that come out to searches, new people that come out that get trained. You have, seasoned individuals that are former, cops, sheriff, EMTs, things like that are leading searches. You have these people called image viewers, and I'm going to have you talk about that. Drone pilots. You could be group leaders, hand radio license operators, people that are wilderness first aid certified. So you're always looking for volunteers. So kind of go over a couple of those, and specifically the image viewers, because people could do that from anywhere, right?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That is definitely something that anyone can do from anywhere. It's not for everyone. And so when we bring on volunteers for that, some of them will work out and some will not, but that's okay. If they can at least give it a try and see if it is something that they like to do. But we found in some situations that bringing a drone in has been successful in a few of our cases. So we have a resource out of Utah called the Western States Aerial Search. And they are a group of guys who are amazing. And they work every weekend to get even better imagery. And from the first time I met them till today, they've come so far. But they don't go out there and do a firsthand search. What they do is they'll have a flight path before they even come out. Then they fly these flight paths, which will accumulate thousands of images. Then those images is now the property of the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation, because we had resourced them in, we pay for their expenses, we get them down here. So then once we have them, we have a team of people we call image viewers who begin the task of going through each image. Our last person we found, we had the images were flown on the 22nd of January. By the night of the 24th, we definitely had the person in an image, in a couple of images actually with different angles. So we had her. So we went to the sheriff the next day to say, this is the coordinate. So what they're actually doing with these drones is clearing an area. Instead of some drone pilots will fly firsthand, like I'm going to fly over there, then I'm going to fly over there. And they're just not systematic enough. So we found that what they're doing, which I don't know any other organization is doing what they're doing, we can be successful in the cases that we have the jurisdiction to go into. But even then, they've had a special permit for the Joshua Tree area with Paul Miller, who is a Canadian, and he had search people out there within 2 hours that he was reported missing, tens of thousands of hours searching for him, 1.5 mile trail that dead ended, no spur trails, and they couldn't find him. Dogs, helicopters. So we brought in Western States Aerial. They did their thing, and we found one femur bone. That's all we need, because things will spread out in time. And so Greg from Western Aerial called the ranger, says, we have coordinates. We think we have a femur bone. Next morning they went out, there he was.
Wow.
So, yeah. And, we can't find everyone, but we give it our best shot. And it gives the families hope. And then if we can't find them, then we can work with them on ambiguous loss and try to get them help with counseling or something in that way, maybe show them some more resources they might be able to use. But it's hard, when search and rescue comes and says, we're done, they don't know what to do. And that's where we come in to help them, to navigate them.
Do you help any family that comes? Will you help anybody? I mean, is there a process to say, do you ever turn anybody away? I don't know how this works. So for our listeners, just so they have knowledge, you're working with a lot of cases, I think, aren't you? You guys are doing whatever you can for whoever you can, I imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why you need the help. You need the volunteers, you need the donations, you need the help to continue the work that you do.
Right. So we had gotten a phone call just the other day from a gentleman in the San Francisco area who has a mother who's lost in the state of Idaho. So when we get a call, the first thing that we're going to do is create this summary. And the summary goes to our investigation team. And that team will take that information and investigate it. So, of course, there's snow in Idaho right now, so we have time on this. And that's one thing we do have, because we are search and recovery, not rescue. We don't have to grab a bag and run out to try to save someone's life. We just want to get the remains back to the family so they can move forward. So once the investigation team gets everything together, then we'll take a look at it as a team, all of us, and we decide we will or will not take the case. And sometimes that just has to do with how small is the area. For instance, a 1.5 mile trail that dead ends, or the person we found was a 73-year-old woman who was in triple digit heat. She can't get that far, right? So when we look at these, if the area is like, it could be anywhere within 20 miles, it's not realistic for us to go out there unless we can get information. And sometimes we can. We can get information from other hikers that were out there. We'll ask people for pictures they took that day, which will tell us what the weather was like, what the trail looked like. And then sometimes we'll go out there, because being out there and looking at it on the map are two different things. And so we'll go out there, and is this a confusing junction? Is there a fast flowing river next to where they were? Things like that. So we take a lot into account before we say we'll take a case. We'd love to take them all, but it's just not realistic. We have a young lady who is missing in the Northern Cascades, and I got a preliminary map on it and immediately thought, if I can get these guys up there in a helicopter, we can find her. Not with the drone guys. If I can get the drone guys up there with all their equipment, with the helicopter, be able to land, we can find her because of the terrain, because of the information I already have. I think we can find her.
I mean, Cathy, you are, seriously, you're just meant to do this. That's all I can say. That is amazing. And which leads me to, okay, so the foundation is a phenomenal thing. It makes me sad that it has to be formed and named after two hikers that are missing. But if anything good has to come out of that, you are you guys are trying to do so much good for existing hikers, education, safety, all of your volunteers that work with you guys, the drone pilots, and that is amazing. So I have a question for you, Cathy. Why are you convicted to do this? To me, this takes such a special person. Why are you convicted to do this?
Well, I think at the very beginning, I thought, I love hiking and I can use my hiking to help families search for someone, but it didn't really turn out that way. I don't get on the trails as much as I'd like to. But when I started working with the families and when I started to see the need for something like this, because I don't know too many places that will be there for the families. A lot of time these families are from far away. They're not hikers. They don't know how to track themselves. They don't know how to read a map. And they don't know what to do. And so I've not yet seen the situation where search and rescue will go in and they'll search for their loved one. And then they come out and say, I'm sorry, we couldn't find her or him. And they're okay with that. And they want to go home. I've not seen that. They want their loved one back. But if they don't have the resources or the means to do it themselves, now they're out there tracking things down. They're not tracking themselves. They're not systematically searching, and they could get hurt themselves. So when we come in, if we're doing a search, we have our radios for communication. Everybody has a radio. Everybody has an orange vest, which the difference between having an orange vest and not is night and day. And whistles and first aid kits, and we do orientation and just really try to keep everyone safe. And nobody leaves until everybody has come in from that search. So we do our best to help the family find or get their loved one back.
Well, I got to tell you, Cathy, you've got my support, and 100%. You are welcome to come on the Jester Section Hiker podcast anytime you want. Give us updates, educate, talk about missing hikers, whatever you want to do. You have an open invitation. I just want you to know that. Sally Fowler has an open invitation, and she knows that. And so as we sign off here, what message do you want to leave? You've given us so much information, so much to absorb. What message do you want to leave the listeners with?
Well, I'd say if you're a hiker and you're listening, is be prepared. The day hiker is the most susceptible of getting lost because they are less prepared than a thru hiker. If you are a family member, we are a resource for you that we can come and talk to you and discuss what's going on with, if you're missing someone, we can help you there and see if we can take your case. I guess I can say that if anyone out there is interested in volunteering, whether it be an image viewer or we're definitely looking for somebody that is proficient in SAR GIS mapping. And we're always looking for volunteers, and some of it can be done remotely. So I would say to check out our website. There's a volunteer button there that you can click and put in your name, your state, and your city, and what do you have that you might be able to bring to the table for us. As far as image viewing goes, we will train. We train a lot of our volunteers. I'm not sure what else to say.
No, that's great. I mean, you've gone over so much information, and I just can't thank you enough for coming on here and talking to us about it. And hikers need to hear this. I mean, end of story. Hikers need to, we tell phenomenal stories all the time, but we tell it makes me feel great and all this and this. And I don't think we talk about safety enough. I don't think we talk about, education, depending on what you're going to encounter on the terrain, like microspikes and ice axing, and I call it ice axing, but utilizing an ice axe properly, being able to self-arrest. And that's what the foundation's for. And that's what you guys are doing. And Cathy, I just thank you for coming on. And like I said, you have an open invitation anytime you want to come on the show.
All right. Thank you so much.
All right. Really appreciate it. Thank you so much, Cathy, for coming on the podcast and sharing about who you are and the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation. You truly have a platinum heart and a love for hikers and their families. Thank you for what you do for the hiking community. Right after my conversation with Cathy, she sent me an email with the Fowler-O'Sullivan Foundation tagline. I can think of no better way to end the episode than to read that tagline. They are family navigators and community educators because every missing hiker deserves to come home. Be safe out there, everybody. Thanks for listening and happy section hiking.
I'm wondering if you'd go wandering with me through the wilderness and woods to where the winds are blowing free, through the darkness of the night, heading toward the morning light. I wonder if you'd wander with me, and I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods. You're wondering if I go wandering with you, what kind of trouble we'll get ourselves into. Would it be wrong to tag along with a band of vagabonds? You wonder if I'd wander with you. So I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river. I'm wondering if you'd come wandering my way, if you ever get lost or if the trail leads you astray. The music of the pack can always bring you back. I wonder, can we wander away? And I'll spread the word and you beat the drum. We'll round up the troops and get the gang to come, and we'll leave the streets and these neighborhoods, head over the river and through the woods.
Looking for a fun way to win up to 25 times your money this football season? Test your skills on Prize Picks, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Just select 2 or more players, pick more or less on their projection for a wide variety of statistics, and place your entry. It's as easy as that. If you have the skills, you can turn $10 into $250 with just a few taps. Easy gameplay, quick withdrawals, and an enormous selection of players and stat options are what make Prize Picks the #1 daily fantasy sports app. Ready to test your skills? Join the Prize Picks community of more than 7 million football fans who have already signed up. Right now, Prize Picks will match your first deposit up to $100. Just visit prizepicks.com/get100 and use code GET100. That's code GET100 at prizepicks.com/get100 for a first deposit match up to $100. Prize Picks, daily fantasy sports made easy.